people are angry. They're angry. And if Donald Trump's methodology of getting people to the polls was to divide the nation, create hatred from one side to the other, make people fear that if they don't vote, that their way of life will change. He's about to get a postdoctorate level education in what American democracy is about.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee, and welcome to the Trump Report. You can watch us every day, Monday to Friday, on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today from another different country, we've seen him in a few places recently, is Malcolm Nance. Malcolm, how are you?
I'm great, doing great. Having a blizzard in Denmark.
Yes, yourself and my colleague Louis Sykes have been providing sort of content from Greenland, but you're currently in Copenhagen, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's very Shakespearean. I mean, very Hamlet-like, I think. Was there snow in Hamlet? I'm not sure.
I think I remember snow at the start of Hamlet. Well, as you're there, we will very quickly sort of start with Greenland and Denmark, because JD Vance was on the Megyn Kelly show last night, and he claimed that European countries have made more sort of concessions than they have publicly claimed over the territory of Greenland. He said, on the subject of Europeans, they're so friendly and private, and they're willing to make a lot of accommodations, and then they publicly attack us. I'm sorry, it's all bogus. The idea they haven't made any accommodations or concessions to the United States, it's not true. What's he referring to there? Because it certainly isn't land, as far as I can work out.
You know, the thing about the Trump White House is you can never tell what they're actually talking about. For JD Vance, with Donald Trump, it's all about breaking you. In fact, JD Vance is a perfect avatar of Donald Trump's technique of getting someone who doesn't agree with him to, compromise their integrity and come over and, act like a sycophant to him. Then he does this little technique called ritualistic humiliation, where he drags them through the mud publicly and have them praise him so that they could never ever turn coat on them again. And so I think Vance and Trump see the Europeans using this thing that is a tool that they don't particularly understand or care about. We called it, what's the word? Diplomacy. And they are not into diplomacy. They don't believe in it. They don't think that it has any place. You can tell just by Marco Rubio, who's, the heir to Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, two diplomats at the founding of the United States who were incredible, real diplomats, right? True statesmen. They don't believe in any of that. What they believe in is a form of bullying. And you can tell that by Marco Rubio's testimony when he goes before Congress. This is a Secretary of State who is essentially just one micron from using the F word and, double fingering up and telling people where to go, right? Where to stuff it.
Do you think these sort of comments from Vance last night, it's maybe not a case that publicly they're saying something different to private? Is it a case that they're not giving us exactly what we want?
Well, I think that whenever Vance talks, he's not speaking to anybody in the news media. He's speaking to Donald Trump. So with Trump, and that's what I was getting to, whereas everybody else uses diplomacy to get concessions and to work out things in a rather genteel manner, they want the deal, which is the business technique of getting something out of somebody and concessions they don't want to give, and that you have to take advantage of them. And if you can always look at what JD Vance says through the words, the deal, it comes out of Donald Trump's mouth every 10 seconds. So here's what they got. What he's trying to say is they were nice to him in private, and then in public, they have to represent their countries. And, everything is this Gordon Gekko-ish worldview that Trump has, the Goodfellas, you didn't make your numbers this week, screw you, pay me. You didn't sell enough lasagna this week, screw me, pay me. That is the Trump world, and it does not mesh well. But everyone is always doing something behind the back of Donald Trump. And that's what JD Vance is trying to ascribe to what we call being nice and diplomacy.
And these concessions he claims that they've made, obviously, we started be me saying that you've been in Greenland and Denmark for the last few weeks. What kind of things are you hearing from people on the ground there?
Zero. There are no concessions. There are no concessions. I think what they're trying to do is, again, the art of the deal spin, which is to pathologically lie about the position of your opponent. And this is one of the things about Trump. He takes advantage of the goodwill of people. And, he will come right out and lie about what you said, just straight up, not, how can I put it? Not a white lie, right? He will create a new fabric of reality, and he will put it into your mouth and challenge you to say something against it. And then he will berate you for challenging the false reality that he's created. So there are no concessions on the ground. I spoke to the foreign minister of Greenland, Vivian Mosfeldt. I spoke to for briefly and heard the remarks of the Danish minister of the defense. Met the commander of the armed forces of Denmark. Met the commander of Arctic Command. I'm now meeting with politicians here in Denmark. They are going along with business as usual. The military is defending their territory. Greenland is a component of that. There's a massive NATO exercise going, which does not involve the United States, even though they were invited. Arctic endurance. And they are setting about proving to JD Vance, in particular, after his remarks last year, that Europe can actually defend Greenland and bolster the Arctic defenses. So I don't know where JD Vance is coming from, but that's not unusual.
Let's move on, if we can, to Steve Bannon. Now, not currently working for the White House or Donald Trump, but he's a very influential figure on the right of politics in the US. And on his podcast, The War Room, last night, he talked about the upcoming midterm elections in November. And he said, damn right, we're going to have ice surround the polls in November. Now, this also comes in kind of the same week that we've heard the president talk about nationalizing the elections. And in his interview to NBC last night, he also said that he would accept election results as long as they were honest. I mean, all of this, it all sounds kind of sinister. It's laying groundwork for something. What are you expecting to happen come November?
Everything's within the context of Donald Trump's mortality, not his morality, because he has no morality, right? So his mortality is driving a lot of this, despite the fact that he somehow manages or orders doctors to lie and say that he's the greatest president, the greatest of health of any U.S. president, not like Barack Obama out there pumping 240 pounds and, running kilometers per day, right? Or even Joe Biden riding a bike. This is an important context that I'm making here, because for Donald Trump, it is about sustaining his legacy. And that's why he's out on this rampage of renaming things, destroying the White House, talking now about leveling John F. Kennedy's Memorial Arts Center for the Arts, not just renovating it. There's word out now, they're talking about leveling it and rebuilding it as the Donald Trump Center, which is just a travesty. So all of these things in context, he now sees his next great goal is the sustainment of his legacy, so that it survives beyond him. Look, Ronald Reagan got one building and one airport named after him. All right. Yeah, that's it. And he forced the naming of the airport. So, and Trump thinks that this is what this is about, that, maybe he's going to lay the groundwork to cancel or intimidate these elections. And Steve Bannon, I wrote in my 2016 book, Plot to Hack America, which came out 6 weeks before Trump's election. I have him down under the column of Russian Putin's philosophers. He is a student of Alexander Dugin, a former communist who believes now in this form. He calls himself a American Marxist-Leninist, but what he really is a totalitarian fluffer, right? He wants to rip down all the hardware and foundations of American democracy to make what he called when he tried to create that school in Italy, right? A bastion for fascists. Say that you're a fascist loud and proud. I mean, this guy is no Albert Speer. This guy is essentially Heinrich Himmler, wearing 3 shirts and a barber coat. So, but he doesn't want to be part of the administration, right? He wants to be the outside man who is the kingmaker, kingbreaker within the administration. He's doing very well. I mean, in emphasizing that, because he can say, well, Trump doesn't talk to me, I don't talk to Trump, but Trump listens to everything I say.
And he is very much the outside man. But as I said, with the kind of Trump's own comments, he is at the very least kind of sowing doubt about the upcoming elections, both in November and 2028.
Absolutely.
But when you talk about legacy there, people like, those closer to Trump, JD Vance and Marco Rubio, I'm sure, they might have designs on perhaps being in the White House one day. There's talk of a Vance-Rubio ticket in 2028. Would they not be thinking at all, please calm this down. We want to be in the White House one day.
No. Okay. You guys need to understand something, Fergus. I know you're English, so you want to apply common sense, logic, and decorum to these conversations. Yeah, well, you could just throw that right out the window when we're talking about the Trump administration. Go the opposite direction, mayhem, chaos, and indignity, and you'd have a pretty good handle on how they handle affairs. Look, JD Vance may be president of the United States. Let's just be honest.
When you talk about common sense, I also try. I don't subscribe to the view that the elections aren't necessarily going to happen. However, like I said, a lot of this talk is incredibly dangerous. And I think from the administration's point of view, is it kind of already successful for them? Because these seeds of doubt have already been sown. We saw it after the 2020 election and the run-up in the sort of first few days. This is already happening, years and months in advance of the vote.
Yeah, when I wrote my last book called "They Want to Kill Americans," right, the terrorist militias and deranged ideology of the Trump insurgency, of which we are now seeing manifest, right? I said that it was clear Trump started his campaign against the election about 5 months in advance. It happened in November. He started in May, June, and then in July it was. I don't know if we're going to have a free and fair election. This is his shtick, because everything that is unfair to Donald Trump is cheating. And as you said earlier, that's what he intends, right? He will only accept the results if they're results that he has. Unfortunately, I think that what he's doing is now generating such a I don't even want to use tidal wave, and tsunami in itself may actually be an imperfect term for what's happening here. We're seeing special elections where Trump, like the one just occurred in Texas, a plus 25 Trump district was lost by 17 points. Okay, I mean that's like a plus 40 shift. People are angry. They're angry. And if Donald Trump's methodology of getting people to the polls was to divide the nation, create hatred from one side to the other, make people fear that if they don't vote, that their way of life will change, he's about to get a postdoctorate level education in what American democracy is about. And, as we say in these elections, you've got to blow out the margins. The system is already gerrymandered enough to where Democrats have to get 10 or more points above what Republicans get just to break even. But they started the Texas gerrymandering. Now California's has been approved. Who else is doing it? New York, maybe Illinois, Maryland just approved it. They may have just cost themselves 20 seats before the election starts. Now this is going to be a anger election. And, based on the people that I talk to, I'm part of the resistance because I believe in the Constitution and common sense, that people are just had it with the hatred. And so I think that whatever Trump is engineering, let me tell you something, Rubio and JD Vance, they don't have it. They're roundly hated by Republicans. And what's going to happen is this is the force of Trump's will, right? Being a billionaire, rich, white guy, right? Who preaches hatred. You're going to see America rise up in a way that I don't think we've seen since the Civil War, which is the entire country aligning against the MAGA ideology to the point where they're already not wearing the hats and not flying the flags. So good luck to JD and them, because if they're up against a ticket of Gavin Newsom and Captain Mark Kelly, I mean, astronaut.
Many people, many sort of commentators, legal experts, and people close to politics have pointed out that nationalizing, for example, would be unconstitutional, right?
Off the Constitution.
But obviously, to this administration, often they might say we'll do it anyway, and we'll see what the Supreme Court has to say.
Well, it's not a question of seeing as the Supreme Court has to say. And, I've interviewed great constitutional scholar, right, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who said that this Supreme Court will do whatever Trump does. They are an ideological Supreme Court, quite possibly the worst since they declared people like me a chair back in 1860, right? Not a joke. All the rights of a chair. Black people had no rights, couldn't appeal to the Supreme Court. So I think that if Trump wants to take that, now we're talking. I'm giving to you this as a straight up intelligence professional. If this were Burundi, if this were, Burkina Faso, I would say the exact same thing. You're looking at civil war. You're looking at civil war, where now what they're going to do for the first time in American history, an election in complete defiance of the Constitution, which is the absolute immutable law of the land. And the only way you can immute it is 75% vote, right? Of all the state legislatures in America. That's not what's happening here. One man deciding that he will nullify an election, people are going to go to guns.
You would go to guns. When you talk like that, Malcolm, it sounds like you're kind of preparing for this.
No, look, I literally wrote a book about how the right wing has been preparing for civil war for over a decade here. And they're the ones who are on Twitter and TikTok going, here's my rifles. We've got this stuff. But, it reminds me of the morning of January 6th. I literally wondered whether the government was being overthrown that morning, and would I have to go down and fight? But we're talking about an unthinkable event. Unthinkable. And if it is that unthinkable, you will see people do not unthinkable things, but people in the United States, all guns aren't on one side. We're talking about people saying, I will defend my state, I will defend my home, I will defend my area. We're not like that. We're not out training as militias the way the right wing are. But they're talking about destroying the Constitution of the United States.
Is the only way to kind of back away from this leading up to the elections is to have more and more Republican politicians turn against the president?
First off, Republicans, there are no Republicans who will turn against the president. Okay? There are MAGA, and then there are Democrats. The Republican Party is a mirror reflection of the will of Donald Trump, because they, one, actually believe all that stuff, but two, they are really afraid of their base, and their base has threatened their lives when they didn't vote. And they don't have to threaten them. They really believe that Donald Trump is the avatar for the id of the relatively, under 300,000 a year white male, but he is the chieftain, the king of the rich white man in America. And they're not going to they're not going to go away from him, because they will lose, and they will have a lashback that could bring you a President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or someone like that.
If you look at the polls of where they are today, obviously, it's a while away. We're taking a sort of subset of where we are. That base we've just talked about is getting smaller and smaller.
That's only in the polls related to things like the economy. When push comes to shove, let's just be honest here, right? These last two elections of Donald Trump were elections about racism. They were about the white base fearing, after all of this, harangue, that they were going to lose power and that by 2050 they would become majority minority in the United States. And Trump hammered it home.
I am afraid that is all we've got time for, Malcolm. Thank you so much for joining us on the Trump Report.
Well, good luck to all of us. Let's see what happens.